This FedGov Today program is sponsored by SAIC. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, a power boost for the acquisition workforce, the playbook for buying the technology of tomorrow today, and a new round of goals to hit for securing your agency's network. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The federal government's contracting workforce is behind the rest of agency staffs in how many early career professionals it includes. A new effort from the Office of Federal Procurement Policies aiming to change that. Christine Harada is Senior Advisor at OFPP. Christine, I quote from a memo that you wrote entitled Building Our Best. 21% of federal employees are in grades 5 through 9, 12% of DoD contracting professionals, and only 8% of civilian agency contracting professionals in those grades. What prompted you when you saw that data to develop this strategy, and what does it include? Christine, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on to discuss a super important topic. Precisely to your point, seeing that data is what really made me sweat. We have a lot of things that we want to accomplish with our acquisition workforce. Of course, we're absolutely key in terms of ensuring our missions are able to be successfully accomplished. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do was to ensure that our acquisition workforce was invested in appropriately, ensuring that we are hiring the best, retaining the best, building the best workforce that we possibly can. As you know, the acquisition workforce is a very inherently governmental function. These are folks that we need to bring on board at a much more junior level and raise them, if you will, within the system across different agencies. And so this memo is trying to address exactly that.
As you examined the problem, what did you see as the shortfalls that needed to be addressed before we get to the steps that you're taking?
Sure, absolutely. So the shortfalls, to your point, number one, there's a dramatic shortfall in the junior staff compared to many other functions or other career series, if you will. There's also a number of actions that we're trying to take with respect to the retention of the workforce. The good news that came out of it, though, is according to the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, the FEV scores for acquisition workforce has been increasing over the last number of years. So the good news is they're a happy and content workforce. Of course, there's things that we should be doing to help that, but this is the bigger red flag for us.
The points that you're making, particularly under the strategic workforce planning portion of this memo, and we'll post it at fedgovtoday.com so folks can read it in its entirety. You're calling on agencies to put together strategic workforce plans. Do they require something different than what the workforce plans are that agencies have already constructed? Are you asking them to aim that work specifically at their acquisition workforces or some other element?
Yeah, we are asking agencies to aim that work specifically at the acquisition workforce. And again, because it's a fairly inherently governmental function, it does require specialized training. This is a skill set that we can't necessarily buy easily from other companies or industries, et cetera. It's also not really a skill set that we see many folks coming in from state agencies or other local government agencies as well. And so as we all have a relatively distinct way of doing the work that we're doing, that's precisely the plan that we're looking to do.
The second element of this strategic workforce planning portion of your memo is setting annual hiring and staffing targets. Does that include maybe having to create new positions that might not exist at the 5 through 9 general schedule levels?
Yes, absolutely. We want to make sure that we're investing in the workforce overall, of course, with the number of staff that we're looking for. In order to be able to help address that, we're also working on establishing partnerships with a number of universities. The Department of Defense, for example, has got a really neat program that they have in statute that effectively is like an ROTC, but for the acquisition workforce. And so trying to take lessons from programs like that, partnering with HBCUs or other state universities to be able to help bring those folks on board early. Acquisitions is also not one of those things that many people study in college, right? I don't go to college to major in acquisitions management. And so how can we think through better about reaching out to those students, encouraging them to think about a career in federal service in the first place and in the acquisitions function as well.
And the third item is one that the federal government, the executive branch, has been trying to crack for as long as I've been around, almost 20 years, and that is leveraging hiring actions across agencies. What's new or different about what you want to do regarding the acquisition workforce in that, or is it just that it's time to leverage it in this area? Other areas are making progress, cyber professionals and others. Is it just something you have not seen enough of in the acquisition workforce?
Yes, that's very much correct. And so we're also trying to leverage a lot of the lessons learned from the bipartisan infrastructure law implementation, Inflation Reduction Act implementation, where we had a lot more common certs shared by different agencies, and sharing that to ensure that we've got a much more efficient hiring process so that we develop a common pool of applicants from many different agencies to consider.
What are the timelines for the deliverables that are included? We just touched on a couple of them, and there are others. What are the timelines for deliverables from agencies, and what's OFPP's role to help them reach those goals?
Yes, OFPP's role is, of course, in the oversight and ensuring that we're managing through and executing on these plans. We're going to be asking the agencies to start submitting those plans later on this fiscal year. And we are looking in the process right now of standing up the advisory committee that is referenced in the memo as well.
Another item that you're working on and that is under a great deal of discussion in federal government is responsible use of AI. You titled this another work, Advancing the Responsible Acquisition of Artificial Intelligence. What's responsible acquisition of AI look like? What's the definition of that, Christine?
That's a really great question, and it's candidly something that we will continue to be working through. We want to make sure that that we are following the principles that were outlined in the President's executive order on AI that was published or signed just a year ago. And we want to make sure that we are protecting civil rights, that we are ensuring appropriate protections, whether it be healthcare type protections, decisions don't negatively, adversely impact citizens as the use of AI is actually being deployed. We want to make sure that we are leveraging the best of the technology while ensuring that we got those protections in place. Also protections around data as well, whether it be like public source data or trademarked or copyrighted data, ensuring that we are implementing that in our programs as best we can.
There are three main items that you write about in this use of responsible acquisition of AI. The first is managing AI risks and performance. How much of that will be incumbent on the workforce to assess that, and how much of that will be a partnership among the acquisition workforce, technology leadership at the agencies, and so on?
Yes, we absolutely envision this to be a complete teamwork effort between the acquisition workforce, the CIO community, the CISO community, the information security officer community, as well as the program folks as well, largely because there will be things that are going to come up that we will not know we can't forecast that at the moment. And so being constantly involved, having those conversations on an ongoing basis is what we're really trying to drive at.
The second item is promoting a competitive AI market with innovative acquisition. Is innovative acquisition an art or a science, Christine?
Oh, it's definitely an art for sure. And it's a cadre of artists that we are absolutely seeking to grow more within the overall acquisition workforce.
What does that look like? How does one know one is doing or seeing innovative acquisition when it's happening?
So there's a number of plays, if you will, in the periodic table of acquisition innovation, or the PTAI, that we have published, and those are some of the notable plays that have been developed thus far. Many agencies have acquisition innovation laboratories as well that provides staff with a safe place to be able to talk through and experiment and think through how would we structure these competitions, how do we want to think about the market that's out there, how ready are they for these types of innovations.
We have about a minute left. The final item in that memo is ensuring collaboration across the federal government, to go back to what we talked about a moment ago about the various communities. Who all would you like to see at the table within an individual agency to talk about this issue, Christine?
Yes, so with the acquisition workforce, we want to make sure that we're working very closely with the program. We need to make sure it's always first and foremost the program and what the goals they have that they want to accomplish. We also want to make sure we're working with the Chief Information Officer and the other technology related folks, the information security folks as well, to ensure that cybersecurity, of course, is a foundation for a lot of the operations that we have, and so very much a collaborative play, if you will.
Christine, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You can find a link to both the memos that Christine talked about on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the playbook for buying the technology of tomorrow today. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. The new TV show Better Contracting, Better Outcomes is available on demand now at fedgovtoday.com. You'll learn from top executives at NASA, DoD, Social Security, and more, plus industry experts that are leading government-industry partnerships. Discover their strategies for improving acquisition efficiency, achieving mission success, and driving innovation through federal contracting. Better Contracting, Better Outcomes, presented by the National Contract Management Association. Watch anytime at fedgovtoday.com. Welcome back. Federal IT leaders say the acquisition workforce Christine Harada talked about in the first part of this program has a huge task ahead to buy the cutting-edge technology agencies need for digital transformation. One example for how to do it already lives inside one agency. Karen Brazell is Vice President for Veterans Affairs in the Civilian Business Group at SAIC. Karen, welcome. Thanks for joining me. The example I'm referring to is the Procurement Innovation Lab at the Department of Homeland Security. What are they doing there that's different and that other agencies you think should emulate?
Well, first, Francis, thank you for having me. So the PIL offers an innovative, they offer the framework for innovative acquisition techniques where acquisition practitioners can come together and share ideas and actually promote streamlined procurement.
Have you seen that start to permeate other agencies? There are other examples of it kind of anecdotally at agencies across government, but have you seen that kind of filter out into other ways, into other kind of standard operating procedures for acquisition yet?
Well, I do know that NASA has the nail. GSA has their procurement innovation, their PIRC. And there's other department agencies following suit because they do realize that today the technology has already outpaced the governance.
The technology outpacing the governance is maybe the biggest hurdle. Christine talked about that a moment ago, is the acquisition workforce building a level of knowledge about the technology that they're acquiring. What's the right mix there? How much does an acquisition person need to know about what she or he is buying in order to be able to buy it effectively?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with valid requirements. You got to have clear requirements to ensure that you're being efficient and using resources wisely. Second, I do believe it takes leadership. Leadership is what drives the culture of any organization. And you have to have visionary leaders who are willing to embrace innovation. And not to mention the FAR. We hear oftentimes, at least in my career, the FAR prohibits me. The way I look at it is if the federal acquisition regulation doesn't say you can't, find a way that you can and be innovative. And the leaders need to promote creativity among their acquisition professionals.
That last element of creativity and knowing what the FAR says you can and can't do specifically was something I know you worked on when you were at the Department of Veterans Affairs doing this exact thing. How did you get that into people's minds that it's okay, you're going to have room to try different things and be creative?
I would say a lot of that came with our VA Acquisition Academy, and of course that's chaired by the Senior Procurement Executive. And that every time we had a graduation, the Senior Procurement Executive, Dr. Angela Billups, and I would be up there, and we'd encourage the team. Because we would ask, what are some of your, what prohibits you today? And a lot of it, well, my leadership won't let me, or the FAR doesn't let me. And we would say, if the FAR, again, let's go back, if the FAR doesn't prohibit you, find a way to yes. Find a way to actually excel those acquisition techniques and take risks. Some of the other things I do believe that are applicable today is other transaction authorities. I know the VA was looking at starting to socialize that acquisition strategy on my way out the door. The Department of Defense is doing it, and then you also have SIBRs, the Small Innovative Business Research.
The requirements piece that you mentioned is something that both in defense and civilian procurement people have been talking about for a long time. What moves people, other than mechanisms like the Procurement Innovation Lab, to a less prescriptive and more flexible requirement structure, do you think? Is it really just a leadership issue, or is there something else that you think has to happen?
I do believe it starts with the stakeholders. To me, it starts with the person with the need. But you have to bring all the stakeholders to the table. Your program office has to be involved, and it's a cradle to grave approach throughout the entire acquisition life cycle. And again, it goes back to encouraging leaders to take those risks, but find a way that's legal. embracing your procurement law group. A lot of people feel that you bring them in towards the end, and that's when they say no. But all the stakeholders to the table throughout the entire process.
We have about a minute left. Who would you like to see around the table? Same question as I had for Christine a moment ago. Who should be around the table to help make these things work from the very beginning, in your view?
Your stakeholders. Specifically, I would say you've got to have federal government, you've got to have your industry leaders like SAIC, who's out there leading Gen AI. You also need to have academia, but at the Department of Veterans Affairs, I'll say specifically, you need to have some of the veterans and their coalitions at the table with you.
Those stakeholders are the people who receive the services from the agency that's providing them, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Karen, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Francis.
You can read more about Karen's ideas on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a new round of goals to hit for securing your agency's network. FedGov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be back in just a moment.
No, the mission does matter. It definitely does, because the services, the data is to me different, and really the mission's different because the data is important for that decision making. They got to make that decision fast wherever they're at. They can't afford, like you said, pull it all the way back to process it. By then, the events happened. So it's important about those services and that data, because that data is different. And then the other thing is there's costs associated with it. If I'm going to ship all that data back, I got costs of shipping it back. So you don't want to ship everything back. You want to just the relevant stuff, but you got to make that decision instantaneous. Whether you're on the border, the airport, anywhere in the world, you got to have that technology there with the right technology and the right services at the right time.
Welcome back. The White House Executive Order on Cybersecurity lists specific tasks and goals for each agency to finish, with tight timelines to finish them. Agencies are now hitting some of those marks and planning how to make the next round of goals. Lynette Sherrill is Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Lynette, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. What does the threat landscape look like now, and how is it evolving for an agency like VA?
So the threat landscape now is probably more complex than it's ever been. I was just having this conversation this morning with my leadership team, how back in the days of a simple virus or single piece of software that's corrupted, bringing agencies down. I think back to 2019 and Conficker days when we all had to respond to that. And now it's multifaceted. We've got to deal with ransomware, denial of service attacks, hacker, activist attacks, and all of that plethora of different types of attacks all happening at the same time. And our cybersecurity teams have to be very agile, where years ago we could be very static and we were always a little behind the curve on things being in cybersecurity, but now we really have to be at the forefront. And it really gives a whole new meaning to making sure you're building security in from the beginning, and that security can't be that bolt-on at the end.
How do you build that agility into your cyber teams? How do you give them the nimbleness that's required to respond or defend against all of these various threats at any given time?
So one of the things that we've been really working with the teams on is call it embracing the red culture. With that type of agility, you're going to have failure. And you've got to build your teams so that they know failure is okay, but we need to learn from that failure and move on. And what we've done at the VA is we've built the culture of taking other cybersecurity incidents and trying to learn from them into our agency as soon as possible, building that continuous culture of learning and embracing the red. If we have a failure, let's embrace it, but let's make sure that on the outside of that incident, we are more secure than we were going in. And we do that with ones that happen in industry as well as ones that happen in VA, and we just continue that cycle.
We talked a little bit before we went on the air that I think people think about VA as a monolith, and it's actually three agencies tied together that perform services for veterans. Does the threat landscape look differently at VBA versus VHA versus cemeteries, Lynette?
That is such a great question, because yes, it absolutely does. So right now, the health sector is one of the most attacked sectors in all of the federal government and in all of the United States and frankly all of the world. The healthcare sector is a target-rich environment for ransomware attacks, and we saw that this last year with the Change Healthcare, which was the largest ransomware attack, impacting 77% of the U.S. healthcare market. So that lets us know the health sector has its own unique problems. But then we also in VA have the VBA is a finance sector and an insurance sector. A lot of people don't know that VBA is also one of the largest insurance companies. And then with that you have the National Cemetery Administration, which is also another different market that we have to protect. So our cybersecurity professionals at the VA really have to understand the threat landscape in 3 to 4 different sectors all at one time and monitor those indicators of compromise every day to make sure that we're able to protect the VA.
What's the state, in your view, of your workforce now as far as the skills that they need to be able to stay up to date? You mentioned agility a moment ago, the ability to move swiftly from one type of response or defense to another, that kind of thing.
The workforce is, we have a great workforce at VA. We have 56% of our cybersecurity workforce is veterans, so we love the mantra veterans serving veterans. And one of the other things that the workforce is really good at is that nimbleness and being able to move from risk to risk. Because as we go throughout the day, we may walk in one day and our risk profile will be high in health sector and not so high in finance, and we sort of pivot and kind of look at those indicators of compromise a little more closely. But 2 weeks later, we may come in, it may be completely different. We may be looking at a financial system that we really have to take care of. And I think one of the things that is overlooked a lot in cybersecurity teams, but our team is particularly good at, is understanding the business impact. We absolutely understand that everything that we do impacts service to a veteran. And those are services that can't be compromised or stopped.
As you see the workforce evolving, and that it's such an important component of the executive order that I mentioned at the beginning of the program, what would you like to be able to do for your workforce moving forward? What are the resources or what are the training, whatever, to help them continue to stay on the track that you would like them to be on?
I'd love to be able to give unlimited training and great training, but it's unrealistic. I think doing those hands-on tabletop exercises in partnership with the business, I think a lot of times as IT and cybersecurity professionals, we can get isolated in our own zeros and ones bubble, and we can lose perspective, not intentionally, of the business side of it. So one of the items we're really focused on over this next year is bringing the teams together with the business to do tabletop cyber exercises, something as simple as that, so that your business partner is standing there or sitting there with you at the table going, hey, if you turn that off, you know it's going to impact this on my side, so that they get that realistic view and they understand the back and forth of what you do matters in every sense of the word, because here's the clinical staff that is telling you, be careful when you do this, and let's partner together and make sure we're responding well.
All right, you used one of the magic words, the word zero. It's the first part of zero trust, an important component of the executive order. Where are you, in your view, on the zero trust journey that at VA, Lynette?
So we have adopted the entire Zero Trust framework really as our guiding principle and strategy moving forward, because we really believe in that North Star and really assuming breach and protecting everything in your network, those critical areas, those critical data sets, just as if they were sitting on the internet themselves. So if you assume breach, then you protect those data sets closer to the original data so that there's no lateral movement if something does happen to your perimeter. We have very good perimeter defenses at VA. And just like everyone, once inside, it's a little easier because you need employees to work, right? That's the whole point of your network. So we have made great progress. One of the areas that VA was a little further ahead, I think maybe than most, was multi-factor authentication in our environment has been a thing for several years. So we've made great progress in that. We have seen an increase in our visibility of up to 40% by rolling out the endpoint detection and response capabilities. And that's just a new security agent on all these desktops and servers that gives us an extra data feed to understand the risk profile in that moment of that particular device, so that we could even kick that device off of our network if it deems that, hey, you're just not safe to even be on our network anymore, so we're going to get rid of you. So we've made a lot of advancements in those areas. We've made a lot of advancements in encrypting. We are almost 100% encrypted everywhere in both data at rest and in transit, so we're doing really well there. Where we have some room to grow and move is in logging of all of our stuff. The mandate is pretty aggressive with logging. They want to log everything. And the storage cost alone for storing all those log files in the VA is beyond our budget. So we are taking a very risk-based approach, and we are making sure that our most critical assets are protected and that we have most visibility there. And we will continue to work down that risk profile over time as resources come to fruition.
We have about a minute left. The idea of assuming breach, that's an important component of Zero Trust, seems to tie back well to that idea you talked about earlier about embracing the red, assuming that there's something going on that we need to be aware of. Is that a fair read on my part?
That is absolutely fair. Yes, definitely. When embracing the red is about assuming breach, it's also about assuming that someone's going to make a mistake and unplug something on your network one day that's going to be critical, or someone's going to implement a change that's going to bring something down. But how do we grow from that, and how do we learn? How do we make sure we put guardrails in place so that next time it's not so easy to maybe make that change without having a peer review, or the making sure that the plug isn't so easy to trip over so that you're impacting services.
Lynette, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
You can read more about the cyber posture at VA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today will be back in just a moment.
Civilian federal service follows countless paths, each road unique, each journey distinct. WEPA has covered them all since 1943, from the demands of the job and accomplishments at work, to the joys of the family and milestones at home, from inside the office to beyond the beltway. Group term life insurance from WEPA has the coverage and benefits to protect you and your loved ones, wherever Fed life leads. WEPA, for Feds, by Feds.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, I'll see you at the Tungsten Automation Public Sector Summit, Thursday, December 12th at the Karasoff Technology Center in Reston. The focus will be on empowering your mission through automation. You can read more about the summit and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching and have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.